Good evening, YouTube. All right, so we have this Axial SCX6 Jeep RC. It's a big 1/6 scale. We bought it used. Ever since we've had it, it kind of felt sluggish. We haven't had it very long, and it made clicking sounds and all kinds of stuff. So I tore it apart the other day and realized that every single bearing in the entire thing, axles, transmission, everything, every bearing's locked up. If it's not locked up, it's really super gritty. So I'm going to take you along for putting this thing back together, getting all the bearings put in it, and yeah, let me get you set up. And okay, so here is the rear differential. Just like a car, it's got a ring and pinion gear. This is the original ring and pinion. It's still pretty good. The front diff, the pinion had a couple missing teeth, so I had to order a new ring and pinion for it. This is the pile of old bearings out of the differentials. They are completely destroyed. Absolutely junk. So we have brand new bearings. A whole package full of them. Really, they weren't that expensive. I figured it'd be a lot more than what they ended up being, but so for all these bearings, it was like 36 bucks, 45 bucks or something after shipping, which I didn't think was terrible. So what I believe happened is somebody ran this thing in a lot of water and never bothered taking it apart and cleaning it and greasing it and all that stuff. So what we get to do is rebuild the differentials, and yeah, so we're gonna have, there's a whole bunch of these bearings. I don't remember what size these ones are. There's 20 of them. I think these are 8 by 16 by 5 rubber seal. These are double rubbers, which is pretty nice. So if you can see that, but the pinion gets one that size, and we'll just shove it down in the bottom, and it gets one this size right here in the front, just like that. And our pinion drops through that direction. Pretty easy. Now the differential, the actual ring gear, it gets a spacer behind the bearings, and it takes this size bearing here. Hoping you can see this. So it just fits up on there. Oh, that side gets a shim as well. I tried to clean most of these parts as best as I could without damaging anything, so either way, it's going to be way better than what it was. There's no way around that one, that's for sure. So it was pretty screwed up before. Get that in there. Feels good. Wow, it actually spins. That's amazing. I'm going to have to go grab my can of marine grease and an acid brush so we can put some grease inside this case. So I'll be right back. I'm going to run and get that tub of grease. Alright, so I got the grease, some acid brushes. This is all it is, just a marine grease. Just helps keep the water displaced from the differential. You're going to get water in these. They're not sealed up very well. We'll just spread a little bit of grease in there. You don't need a whole bunch. You put too much in there, it just turns into a mess the next time you want to clean everything. We'll just put some clumps of grease in there. Nothing crazy. Just enough to coat everything and make sure it's going to keep on spinning. There we go. That should be plenty. So this is what retains the carrier in the differential, and it'll have some screws going down through it, just like this. And we'll run them screws in there. They're long, that's for sure. Need to get one of those little electric screwdrivers for this kind of stuff. It'd probably be really helpful. Don't go crazy tightening this stuff. You're threading this into plastic. You will strip it out easily. There's no need for it to be crazy tight. My hand's probably in the way there. Long-winded screws, that's for sure. Go around, check them all, make sure they're tight, but not too tight. Wipe that little bit of excess grease off. Oh yeah, that spins good. You couldn't even hardly spin it before, it was so locked up. That feels way, way, way better. Okay. Next we can put our axles in. We'll just put a tiny bit of grease on the end that goes into the carrier. Like I said, nothing crazy, just a little bit of grease will do you. Now we got to put in 2 more of these bearings. They just slide right onto the axle and right into the housing, just like that. Simple as simple can be. Onto the axle. Slide it in. Make sure everything's rotating freely. That's good. Alright, there's these little screws here that retain the bearing. So we'll put those in next. They just go right in the end of the axle tube, and all they're doing is retaining the bearing. Trying to stay in frame there, but it's kind of hard to do. I'll show you what it looks like here. As soon as I get this tight. Okay, so that's all it is. Those screws just barely catch the edge of that bearing to retain it, so it can't slide out of there. Alright, so next, in the axle, you got this little plastic spacer that goes on there. And then you have your hex drive for your wheel. Right there. It's got a little hole in it for a pin to go through it. Line it up with the hole. Then we just take this little pin, it goes down through the hole. Once you get it lined up where you want it. And we'll tighten that down. That's all there is to that. So same thing on the other side. We got 2 screws we got to put in. I was looking for the screw, already put it in there. Oh, and just a little update. I'm hopefully bringing the Power Wagon frame home this weekend, so we can start cutting that thing apart. I stayed after work a little bit today and cleaned up the welds and stuff that were all over the frame that didn't belong there. So I'll be bringing it home so we can start cutting it apart and fixing it. So again, same thing. Put this little plastic spacer on there, just like that. And our hex drive for our wheel, and the cross pin that goes through that to hold it all together. That's it. So there is the rear axle put back together. Feels nice and smooth, as it should. Alright, so the front axle's same thing. The only difference is it's got some steering knuckles on it, so I'm not going to bore you with that unless I come across something that is different than what we just did. So I will bring you back as soon as we start on the transmission or find something cool on the front axle to show you. Alright, I'll bring you back. Alright, both axles are fully assembled. They are ready to go back in the Jeep. But before we do this, we're going to go ahead and get the transmission rebuilt. That'll be the pain in the butt part. There's a lot of pieces inside that thing, a lot of gears, a lot of moving parts. So, and I have it tore apart already. So here's the transmission and all of its pieces. I got all the screws and whatnot right here. Yeah, a lot of pieces to this transmission, a lot of pieces. So the trick is first figuring out what goes where. I do know right off the rip we're going to have a bunch of bearings to pop in here. A whole bunch of bearings. These all get pushed into this case here. Same thing with the other case. It gets a few bearings put in it as well. They're a little loose, but it'll be fine once you tighten everything down. So we've got bearings in both the front cases. Now there's some gears and such. There's these little tiny gears. They get little bearings popped into both sides of those, like this. Then there's a little tiny axle that goes through those bearings for that gear to ride on. There's 2 of those inside this transmission. Here's another one. Same thing. It gets 2 bearings and an axle, just like that. And I believe that's all the bearings that's needed. I believe so anyway. I've got a whole bunch of extras over here, but I got 6 more bearings. Oh nope, there's some bearings that go inside this case as well. So let's let's pull this apart. There's a bearing that goes down inside this case here. That one's kind of tricky to get to. Alright, got a bearing down in there now. there is a shim on this piece, and there's a bearing that's going to go in this. Two bearings actually. So this gets two. Just like that. That gets two bearings. And then, yep. I gotta remember how this goes back together. There's a lot of pieces inside this thing. I gotta remember where that shim goes. Let me get the bearings all wrapped up on this thing and I'll bring you right back. Alright, I think I got it figured out. So there's the transmission internals for the most part. Now we gotta try to get all this back down in the case, which can be tricky. So there's a little gear here that goes down inside the case right there. And then we got this gear, which has a spacer sleeve on it. This is the other output for the drive shafts. I don't know if you can see that. Other output for the drive shafts. There's another one right there. This is our shift fork. So now we got to try to get this case down over top of all this stuff, which could be tricky. Got to get that gear up in there and clearing everything like so. You gotta line everything up in there just like that. That's how it all goes together right there. So without losing half the case here, let's throw a couple screws in this. Let me back you up just a little bit. Throw a couple screws in it just so we don't lose the parts. Just a couple small screws. Whoops. Alright, now before we put the cap on it, cover, we need to put some grease down in there so everything gets lubricated. Do the best we can there, getting as much grease down in there. But I don't want to overdo it either. It'll bind the transmission up, and then you'll have issues you don't want to have. But you also want to make sure everything's going to get grease to it. Feels pretty good. All right. Now, I believe we are ready to go on with our case cover without hopefully losing all these bearings. It might be easier to place the bearings on all the parts first, and then go on with the case cover. Just like that. Now we'll throw a couple screws in that. Make sure everything rotates like it's supposed to. screw seems a little short. Let's throw a longer one in there. Alright, that should hold it together. Feels pretty good. I'm not sure if we're in high or low. Always in high. So there's that's your high-low selector there, that little shaft right there. That's your high-low selector. Alright, so I think we can go ahead and put in the rest of our screws. It's kind of short also. It's hard to remember where all this stuff goes. I tore it apart so I could figure out what I needed. It's been so long since I tore it apart. I don't remember where they all go. But we'll figure it out. Can't be rocket science. Somebody else built it, so we should be able to build it too. My dad always taught me that. He said, if somebody else can do it, there's no reason why you can't do it. And that's the way I've looked at everything I've ever done ever since I was told that. I'm willing to try anything. Obviously questions are going to come up, but if you don't try, how do you know if you can do it or not? Can't be scared of it. Worst you do, screw something up, and as long as you don't get injured, it's just stuff at that point, and that stuff really doesn't matter that much. It can always be replaced, so don't be afraid to give it a shot, and you'd be amazed what you can do as long as you're not scared of it. So there's our transmission reassembled. I still got to clean this spur gear up and get these old pads out of here. I've got a new slipper clutch for it as well. We got slipper clutch discs and all kinds of random stuff. So let me get everything figured out here. Let me go get my new slipper clutch, clean this up, and I will bring you back shortly. Good evening, YouTube. Alright, so this Jeep, I went ahead and put it all back together off camera. Here it is. It's an Axial SCX6 6 scale. The axles are back in it, transmission's back in it. So we bought this thing used about, I don't know, it's been a while ago, last summer sometime, and it always sounded funny. It clicked and it just felt underpowered, and I never thought nothing of it. I just kind of left it alone. We didn't really play with it much, so I decided to go ahead and tear into it, and like you've seen in the video, every single bearing absolutely shot, locked up. I didn't know this thing was really moving, to be honest with you. So I did get it all back together. What a difference, night and day difference. Thing's got all kinds of power now, smooth, runs really well. We did add this light bar to it right after she got it, and let's turn it on here. It's a pretty neat toy. So it's in high range right now. It's a big okay, let's just put it into comparison with a 10th scale, which is your average RC car. So this is a TRX4, Traxxas TRX4 High Trail. I mean, just the size difference isn't comparable. The thing's absolutely huge. The motor's massive, everything in it's huge. Transmission's huge. It does have low range. There's low range. It's a really neat RC car. That was another problem with it too. You couldn't hardly get the shift between high and low, and it was just I don't know, it felt like a piece of junk. And these things are expensive new. We didn't pay nearly what they want new for them. But everything's good now. So, like I said, you're going to see all kinds of stuff in this channel. On this channel, it's today it was RC cars. Hopefully next it's going to be getting back on this Power Wagon. We got the frame back after blasting, so now we got to start cutting out the old rot and fixing it. That'll be coming up soon. We got a cab to fix. I got a bunch of stuff to do, so you'll get to see a little bit of all of it. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe, share it with your friends, and hit that like button. Leave me a comment, greatly appreciated. I didn't show putting this thing completely back together. I showed rebearing the axles and the transmission. But if you have any questions on certain parts of the thing or other RC cars maybe I have, I can do some videos on other things too if you're unsure how something comes apart or goes together or whatever. So yeah, please subscribe. It really does help me. And we'll catch you guys on the next one.